Everything you know about Transylvania is wrong. Although Transylvania became a popular setting in fiction due to books like Dracula, games like Resident Evil Village, and movie series like Hotel Transylvania, most people have no idea how this place actually looks like and what our culture actually is. So in this video we're gonna debunk the top 10 misconceptions about Transylvania, and be prepared because some of them will actually shock you. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In case you're new here, hi, I'm Anna, a Transylvanian villager, and I make videos about random topics related to Central and Eastern Europe because I feel like there's not enough content about it online. So if you're into that, smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. As you may already know, I'm a mixed ethnic Transylvanian who was born and raised in a Transylvanian village, and today I have a special guest with a similar yet extremely different background who will help me debunk the most common misconceptions about our homeland.
Hi, I'm Isabel, a fellow mixed ethnic Transylvanian who was born in Germany and raised in the US. I work as an artist and researcher on educating the West on the rich folkloric history and ethnography of Romania. I'm so happy to be collaborating with Anna on this clip.
Before we jump into today's topic, I need to refresh your memories about what Transylvania actually is. Transylvania is a mixed ethnic region in central Romania with a diverse culture and a controversial history that birthed a lot of ethnic tensions, and of course bizarre arguments in the comment section of any video that dares to mention this place.
Transylvania, pământ românesc.
Erdély magyar föld.
Throughout history, this region belonged to the Dacian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Kingdom of Hungary, the Austrian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Kingdom of Romania, the Socialist Republic of Romania, and at some point it was even a semi-independent principality. Today it is part of the glorious country known as Romania.
I love Romania, my favorite country,
Which is located at the crossroads of Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe.
Unfortunately, in the West, most folks do not know about Romania, and yet they have heard of Transylvania being a fictional land made for literary exploitation, a haunting Eastern European land filled with cryptids such as vampires and werewolves, not to mention haunted forests filled with aliens and spooky gothic architecture.
As a local, I absolutely love this place due to the colorful culture, diverse architecture, and beautiful natural sights.
And as an immigrant in the US that goes back to visit, the culture and inherent magic of the region is so rich that we felt it was paramount to share the real Transylvania.
So, without further ado, let's dissect this topic. In global mainstream media and fiction, the cultures and history of Europe's bad side have been misrepresented for the longest time, partially because many Western journalists, authors, and filmmakers weren't notified yet that we already defeated the commies over 30 years ago and they don't need to push the Cold War era anti-Eastern European propaganda anymore. Additionally, during the communist era, the countries of this region were heavily isolated from the rest of the world, and the curious minds filled the gaps of inaccessible information with speculation, like your Eastern European aunt fills your DMs with cringy gifs. Hollywood contributed to this issue using movies to mock and demean certain regions, often with the intention to push a political narrative. In the Western publishing industry, however, cultural misrepresentation was a trend even before that, with books like Dracula, which is solely based on ignorance and xenophobic stereotypes. Although the Berlin Wall fell long ago and the gates of information are wide open now, many contemporary authors, journalists, and screenwriters still consider speculation to be the mother of their wisdom and continue painting Eastern Europe as a cold, dark, impoverished, uneducated, horrifying, mysterious place with alcoholic brutes and mythical creatures running around to terrorize Westerners. Let's not forget about all the cringy accents.
So where do I find Dracula?
Used to live in this very house 4 centuries ago. No one knows where he lives now.
When doing my research on the origins of these perceptions in the West, I stumbled upon major news networks doing interviews with a sort of exotifying and playing into the haunted narrative. No curiosity on the rich actual history or the ethnography.
You're originally from Romania, and obviously you speak your fluent Romanian.
Would you bite me in the neck?
Anna and I spoke of this exotification as a power play between the East and West, almost as a sort of dance for me monkey performance. We're not vampires, we're actually a mix of ancient peoples, rituals, symbols, and even matriarchal societies.
So let's debunk some misconceptions about this region. There's nothing Eastern Europeans like to argue about more than the geopolitical borders and definitions of their lands. Where does Central Europe begin? Where does Eastern Europe end?
What do you mean Eastern Europe? We are Central Europe, not Eastern!
Which countries are Balkan?
This river here is the official geographical limit between Balkan and Middle Europa.
Where is Transylvania? In some sources, you might see Transylvania defined as the 9 central counties of Romania, which closely resembles the borders of the historical voivodeship of Transylvania, meaning the plateaus surrounded by the eastern, southern, and Romanian western branches of the Carpathian Mountains. Other sources divide Romania into 3 parts: Transylvania, Wallachia, and Moldavia, where Transylvania encompasses the entire northwest side of the country. According to this definition, the western border of Transylvania is the border between Hungary and Romania, which was settled by the 1920 Treaty of Trianon, when Transylvania officially became a part of the Kingdom of Romania. Both definitions are correct depending on the context. When it comes to discussing culture and history, it is kind of impossible to lump Banat and Maramuresh into the same category as Transylvania, given their unique set of cultural practices, folk culture, and of course historical influences. This is why in my videos I use the first definition. In a more political and administrative context, however, I can see why the second definition makes more sense.
So in 1725, vampire hysteria swept Europe, beginning in Serbia, not even in Romania. In the Viennese archives, there contains one of the earliest uses of the word vampiri in an official article published in the Austrian newspapers. The hysteria in Central Europe was so severe from the newspaper article that Empress Maria Theresa dispatched her official royal doctor to release a statement that it was not real. However, the damage was done and the hysteria spread to Western Europe. Books on the topic of vampires began to be printed in France. Captain Vampire by Marie Nizet, which had many overlaps with Stoker's Dracula, were one of many popular books of the time. Dracula then was published and printed on a yellow-covered book. The origin of the yellow-covered paperbacks, as train travel became popular, were sold at train stations. These yellow books were full of Victorian taboos, so this created the context for vampires to be a sex symbol, a taboo, and something titillating for Victorian Western culture. Emily Gerard's book, Transylvanian Superstitions, was an amateur ethnographer's look into Romanian folktales and myths. When Gerard interviewed some women in Sibiu, they mentioned the word necuratu, meaning unclean. There were many rituals in Romanian folk traditions around burial, and if you did something bad in the living life, you were not going to have a proper burial. However, she misheard the word, and that is the origin of nosferatu, which doesn't mean anything in Romanian. Also, during the late 1800s and early 1900s, the racist sentiments of Eastern Europe shone through in writing and politics, so Transylvania was ripe for the scapegoating of the massive fear of this vampire hysteria. So no, vampires in the Western sense are not a thing. Strigoi and Pricolici, on the other hand...
The thing about Strigoi is that it often gets mistaken from vampires, though it is usually described as a troubled spirit risen from the grave who can transform into an animal, become invisible, and bring bad luck to their living relatives. The oldest Romanian historical record mentioning the Strigoi is Dimitrescu Cantemir's description of Moldova, the eastern region of Romania, and it had nothing to do with Transylvania. But even before that, one of the first European records referring to this creature under the name Strigon actually came from 16th century Istria, which is in the modern-day Croatia, and this record was accusing a villager named Jure Grando Alilovic of being such a creature. Strangely enough, today he is often referred to as the first person described as a vampire in historical records. We have to keep in mind that immortal creatures who feed on human blood and life energy actually exist in the mythology and folklore of practically every region all around the world, like the Impundulo of South Africa, the Japanese Nureona, and the Aztec Chihuateto. And it's not unique to European beliefs. I I've seen several videos and articles claiming that Dracula was inspired by the Prince of Transylvania, Vlad the Impaler.
Impale her? I hardly know her.
Now, there's so many things wrong with this statement. Firstly, Vlad Tepes, also known as Vlad the Impaler, was not the ruler of Transylvania. He was the ruler of Wallachia, which is the southern region of current-day Romania. Truth to be told, Vlad's real-life story was a million times more interesting than this dumbass book. He was born in one of the most beautiful places in Transylvania, Sighișoara, which is a medieval Saxon city, and the house in which he was born still stands today, although it was turned into a restaurant. He was the son of Vladislav II, aka Vlad Dracul, who was the ruler of Wallachia. Some sources claim that his nickname, Dracul, came from the fact that he was a member of the Order of the Dragon, called Draco in Latin. However, Dracul also means the devil in Romanian, so it could be a reference to his cruelty as well. The name Dracula is a mispronunciation of the name Dracula, meaning Dracul's son. During Vlad's younger days, Transylvania was a voivodeship in the Kingdom of Hungary, ruled by John Hunyadi, or Jan Kude Hunyadara in Romanian, and the two of them didn't have the most amicable relationship. In 1442, Vlad and his younger brother Radu were handed over to the Ottomans as political hostages, and the two of them spent a significant time there. After his release, Vlad became the ruler of Wallachia, and his first public display of cruelty was an act of revenge towards the murderers of his older brother Mircea. His conflict with the Turks began due to his refusal to pay the unfairly demanded taxes to the Ottoman Empire, and his resistance was backed up by the Pope and the new Kingdom of Hungary and Croatia, Matthias Corvinus, as well. Vlad was very talented at psychological games, causing panic amongst the enemies, attacking Ottoman camps at night in Turkish uniforms, tricking them to fight against a bunch of trees, sending sick people into Ottoman camps to spread disease, and, of course, decorating his lands with the corpses of impaled people. Although foreigners might see him as a cruel, bloodthirsty villain, in the eyes of the locals, he was a protector, and a hero almost as fearless as the average Eastern European mom washing the windows of a 6th-floor commie block.
I fear no man, but that thing. It scares me.
In short, no, Dracula did not rule Transylvania.
Bran Castle is not and never was Dracula's castle. Despite Stoker's research on the geography of Transylvania for his novel, I must give credit where credit is due. He actually was inspired by an Irish castle by where he grew up. Dracula was originally from Sighișoara, which is a beautiful medieval town that is not talked about enough in the West. 11th century Teutonic Knights actually built the castle, and it was used for strategic military use by Transylvanian Saxons.
When Transylvania became a part of the Kingdom of Romania, the castle was turned into a royal residence, which was the favorite retreat of Queen Marie. Then later it was inherited by her daughter, Princess Ileana. During World War II, it played an important role as a military hospital after the actual hospital of Brasov was bombed by the Americans. Later, it was taken over by the communist state.
Communist politicians decided that to make a better relationship with the West, let's turn it into a Dracula museum because of the similarities that Stoker made in his novel with the architecture of this castle. We love the masterful commie misdirection of media.
Thanks to Capcom's 2021 horror game Resident Evil Village, in recent years another Romanian castle gained some popularity, the Peles Castle, which served as a model for creating the creepy castle of Lady Dimitrescu.
Yes, that's how you're supposed to pronounce her name.
After the release of the game, I've seen several articles and travel bloggers talking about this building, often calling it the most beautiful castle in Transylvania.
The Peles Castle is the most beautiful castle in Transylvania.
Stupid man thing!
Here's the problem. The Peles Castle is located in Sinaia, which is in Prahova County, and that is not part of Transylvania, but that is actually Wallachia, the southern region of the country. The castle was built between 1873 and 1914 under the rulership of Carol I of Romania, standing on the route that links Transylvania and Wallachia together. Given that it's a fairly new building, it has a completely different architectural style than the medieval Transylvanian castles, designed in neo-Renaissance style by German and Czech architects. Also, fun fact, this was the very first European castle to be fully lit by electricity. In short, no. Castle Dimitrescu is not a Transylvanian castle, and during the years when the Pilis castle was built, Transylvania was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, while Wallachia was in the Kingdom of Romania. In Western movies, scenes set in Transylvania always play out in medieval castles, as if that was the only type of building here. In reality, Transylvania's architecture is very diverse and it encapsulates the rich history and the different cultural influences of various cultures. Medieval Gothic buildings are obviously an important part of that, like the castles and fortresses of Bran, Hunedoara, Rushnov, Deva, Făgăraș, Rupia, and many more. We have to mention the most beautiful piece of Transylvanian Saxon architecture too, like the towers of Sighișoara, as well as the fortified church of Birtan. Under the rule of the Austrian Empire, Baroque designs gained a lot of popularity, which is visible in the churches and other historical buildings of Cluj-Napoca, Sibiu, and Târgu Mureș. Later, in the days of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the entire region was flooded with Viennese secessionist architecture, the most iconic buildings being the works of Pákai Lajos, like the Continental Hotel, Kiosk Restaurant, Cultural Casino of Cluj, several schools and university buildings. We cannot talk about this architecture style without mentioning the opera houses of Helmer and Fellner and several town halls all around Transylvania. After Transylvania and other western regions became parts of the Kingdom of Romania, Romanian architecture styles, like the Brâncovenescu one, became more popular in this area. The most obvious examples are the Orthodox churches and cathedrals like the one in Cluj-Napoca, the one in Alba Iulia, and the one in Târgu Mureș. The commie architecture isn't something we're proud of, to be honest. Well, except for the weird Gen Z kids who glorify the commie aesthetic.
Haha, atât de relatabil. Dau share.
Other buildings you might see around here are the extremely colorful Gabor Roma palaces, the small blue houses in rural areas, and the old wooden churches, which are all important parts of the Transylvanian architecture. So no, it's not just Gothic castles. Resident Evil Village is said to be set in a Transylvanian village, which seems to be a complete shithole. The houses are crumbling, there's no electricity, no proper roads, and overall everything looks like it had just been through World War I. As a person who spent over 20 years in a Transylvanian village, I must say that portrayal really amused me because things are quite different in real life. Transylvania's rural architecture differs from region to region, and each area is beautiful on its own. Some places I like to highlight are Sâncraiu, Rimetea, Saskiz, Șirnea, Prejmer, and of course Birtan. Not to mention the natural beauty of the Transylvanian fields, mountains and forests which surround the villages. But the village aesthetic doesn't only include the appearance, but the beautiful traditional clothing and the intriguing cultural practices as well, which is something I discussed in my Transylvanian culture video that you should definitely check out after you're done with this one. I suspect that foreigners have this image of Transylvanian villages due to the Western so-called documentary makers who intentionally try to portray Eastern Europe as a shithole and often seek out the most rundown house in a village inhabited by someone really old or extremely impoverished and use footage of those places to show how terrible life is in rural Romania. Believe me on this one, I met people like that in the past. Now, I'm not gonna pretend like everything is perfect here. There are some more isolated villages which went through a massive population decline in recent decades due to their location and lack of job opportunities, which are practically abandoned and only inhabited by people over the age of 70 nowadays. Not to mention the poorest village and the worst ghetto, Transylvania, or maybe even the entire country, which is called Patarut. And this is a village literally built on a trash dump, and this place is often sensationalized in a mocking and disrespectful way towards the inhabitants in documentaries and other forms of Western media. But using these examples would be like me showing you footage and the crime statistics of Huddersfield and claiming that this is what the entirety of the UK is like. If you want to learn more about the Transylvanian village aesthetic, I suggest you visit the Astra Museum of Sibiu or the Romulus Vuia Museum of Cluj-Napoca, which are open-air village museums that exhibit the architecture of each region. Story time! When I used to live in a Transylvanian village back in the days when you needed a landline phone to access the internet, one night someone stole all the phone cables from all around the village, after which the phone company refused to re-establish the network and every single Romanian internet provider refused to collaborate with our village for years after that. The bottom line is, although the village architecture might not be that trashy, some of the villagers definitely are. A while ago I saw a documentary about the spooky, scary Transylvania forest called Hoia. And I was kind of confused because I live quite literally next to it and I never knew it was such a big deal. While researching the topic, I saw several articles and videos talking about UFO sightings and paranormal activities. One of the proofs they showed, it was this patch of missing trees, which is definitely a result of paranormal activities and not at all the fact that many people still use firewood heating systems, but getting a permit for chopping wood is really difficult, so some people might sneak into a secluded corner of the woods at night and steal some firewood. The other strange occurrence people like to point out about this place are the bizarrely shaped crooked trees. Fun fact, you can see trees like that in different regions of Central Europe, like in Poland's crooked forest. Now, ethnographers theorize that it was a common practice in the early 20th century for carpenters to use different methods to pin down small trees for a couple of years to bend them in shapes that can be used for round furniture and boats. Instead of blaming this easily explainable phenomena on ghosts and aliens, there are some more interesting things you could attribute them to.
Ghost and alien ideas are an import from the West. I recently watched a behind-the-scenes clip making of The Nun, which was filmed at the Hunedoara Castle. The lack of interest in the local myth, stories, and folklore is infuriating and dismissive. When it comes to ghosts and spirits in Romanian folklore, we have more of a mischievous and mercurial approach to spirits. From iele, that are more like forest sirens bringing wayward shepherds into the forest. Their origins are mixed, as possible women that never received justice in their living life. The rich folk creatures of Romania are the iele, the balaur, uriaș, strigoi, capcăun, pricolici, muma pădurii, zburător.
Let's not forget the zâna.
I wish a film would actually use our folk creatures for a horror film, if they must make horror.
Well, at least we have the comic book series called The Water Pixie, which portrays a way more interesting side of that topic. As you already know, Transylvania has a mixed population and it's inhabited by the handful of Romanians who haven't migrated to Italy to pick strawberries yet. There are also Transylvanian Saxons, Hungarians, Sacklers, Romanis, and even some Ukrainians and Armenians. Each ethnic group has contributed to the diverse culture of this region. The Saxons built some beautiful castles, fortresses, and churches. The Sacklers invented the Kürtös kalács. Romanians and Hungarians contributed to the decline of my mental health, filling my comments section with stupid arguments based on 100% political propaganda and 0% historical facts. And of course, the Romanis blessed us with several great musicians.
Johnny, we need the most brain-dominating, toe-tappinating song in the history of all the universe. This is it.
Hai în Mercedes, hai în avion și la sutien să-ți bag 1 milion.
The hate between Romanians and Hungarians is a popular topic among politicians and journalists in both countries, especially by those who don't even live in Transylvania. Ooh, the Hungarians want to steal Transylvania. Wow, you should vote for Fidesz because the Romanians are oppressing Transylvanian Hungarians and only Fidesz can save them. This argument began centuries ago, and throughout history it's been kept alive and weaponized by whichever group was in power for political gain. Due to this, the internet is filled with vicious debates and hilarious memes addressing this issue. Luckily, as a mixed ethnic person, I can tell you things offline are way less heated. Although we have our political and historical problems, do you think that Ionuț from whichever bumfuck village cared that Katika who sells eggs at the weekly fair is Hungarian? Mixed ethnic relationships and friendships are actually pretty common, and at this point I feel like over 50% of us has some sort of mixed ancestry of Romanians, Hungarians, Romanis, Saxons, and many people from Gela even have Armenian ancestry, but that's a topic for another day. Compared to more diverse counties like Cluj, there's more tension in mono-ethnic regions, where a lot of people take their coffee with political propaganda instead of milk, and they possibly never interacted with anyone outside of their own ethnic groups. In other regions, however, although our politicians argue a lot, the general population doesn't really care. We just wanna eat our kurtos, drink our tsuika, and chill together. Or just cuddle with a vampire under a flowery blanket while the sarma is slowly cooking on the stove, filling the entire kami block with the scent of boiling cabbages. That's the Transylvanian dream. If you ever saw an article in British media about Romania, you probably think that Romania is this crazy dangerous place where everyone is stealing everything because we have no other ways to survive.
The advert that you took out, you said Romanians are responsible for 7% of crime across Europe, and that simply isn't true, is it?
90% of all card skimming operations across the whole of the European Union are done by Romanian and Bulgarian criminal gangs.
That's not an official statistic.
I guess my phone cable story didn't help with this. But fun fact, according to Numbeo, which is a crowdsourced online database of perceived quality of life metrics, 2 out of the top 10 safest cities in Europe are actually in Romania, one of them being Cluj-Napoca in Transylvania and the other one is Timișoara from Banat. As a person who lives in one of those cities and travels a lot, I can say I feel way safer here than in certain Western European cities that I visited in recent years. Though that's probably because all our criminals moved to the UK. The greatest danger to tourists are the bears, so please, and I cannot stress this enough, do not try to take selfies with our wild bears. Honestly, the only things I'm scared of around here are the Western sex tourists.
Romania is in the top 50 richest countries in the world.
It is also in the top 20 European countries by GDP, with a significant growth since the beginning of the 21st century. This rapid economic growth can be credited to Romania's booming IT industry, the most important place for that industry being in the heart of Transylvania, Cluj-Napoca. According to World Bank's urban development expert Marcel Ionescu-Heroiu, Cluj at the moment is the fastest growing city in the European Union. Eurostat collects data from the largest cities in the European Union, and if we look at the period in which the data were collected, 2000 and 2019, so in one generation, Cluj's GDP has increased 4.5 times. Our quality of life index also has some decent values. In short, don't believe everything you see in Western media, especially the Brits. They say some nasty things about Eastern Europeans.
Unfortunately, the echoes of English and Western imperialist thought and culture linger with the identity of Transylvanians. Yet, if you visit the region, most Romanians will laugh at the thought of vampires, ghosts, and aliens.
Not to mention that in the past, the public image of Transylvania and Eastern Europe in general was severely damaged by xenophobic authors, journalists, and Cold War era propaganda, which worked really well given that people did not have access to information about the reality of this region. Although today pretty much everyone has access to the internet, many people still have no idea what is happening here, especially because the social media algorithms prefer content created by delusional Western communists and red-pilled YouTubers who for some reason feel the need to drag us into their little culture war and constantly talk about our countries without doing as much as a quick fucking Google search to at least see where our countries are on a map.
To Germany, which it's not Poland, but yeah, but it's like, oh my, girls are like 10 times prettier.
Seriously, the only red pill these people should be taking is quetiapine. There are many things Central and Eastern Europe could be praised for, especially the colorful culture and fascinating folklore, which tell thousands of engaging stories.
Hopefully there will be a revival of the real rich folklore of Transylvania with a rise in secular paganism in the West that will hopefully demystify Vlad Dracula and give credit where credit is due.
My channel's purpose is to take back the narrative of our lands and show people what Transylvania, the Balkans and the rest of Central and Eastern Europe actually look like. And I advise you to seek out more channels created by people who were actually born and raised in this region, spend the majority of their life here and can actually present what life is in Eastern Europe from personal experience. But enough about that. Have you been to Transylvania or are you planning to visit it? Tell me in the comments below. If you want to see more videos about Central and Eastern Europe, presented from the perspective of a local with a stereotypical Eastern European accent, check out my other videos. And subscribe or the Copperdick Owl will grate you. Thanks for tuning in and have a nice day.